Yeah.
And you can go around and around in the turnstile as long as you want. Although there did come times, like with the Forge booth and in the case of a few individuals, where I said, you really need to graduate now. I mean, that's where universities have a benefit, right? We even joke about it. Well, at least he's going to graduate, and then he'll be gone, right?
Yeah.
But that applies both to annoying people and to your best.
Yeah.
You don't want your high-achieving people, the ones who are benefiting the most. And high-achieving isn't even the right word. Let's say the person who's benefiting the most from being there. You don't want them to stay. You want them to go, right?
Yeah.
And that's...
Could you elaborate? Yeah.
Yeah, well, because first of all, the process in and of itself is developmental.
Okay.
Being in graduate school is an excellent example. It is a developmental process. Social, intellectual, professional. Right? And it's also involved with literal development in terms of age, because it takes so fucking long that there's going to be, an aging process in it that we all are aware of. If you've seen people go through graduate school, you know that all those dynamics are explicitly baked into the requirements and the activities. So, as we like to say, a person should effectively be a professor before they go.
Okay.
Right. Before the person finishes their PhD, everybody should be saying, "Isn't it about time?"
Yeah.
You're ready. You're interacting with the rest of us as a peer, and we're sick of calling you a graduate student. You need to be out there and have students of your own. You need to be out there in a position where you have a policy role somewhere else.
Yeah.
So that our activity here has enhanced the entire activity.
What you're saying there is perhaps one of my deepest teachings of this decade in RPG communities. So in about 2012, I really had the how should I say that, the idea of the utopia that we could be all together, and we would be all friends together. And
yes, indeed. Yeah.
And
Italy has run into this. One couple breaking up a few years ago in Italy, who only happens to be the organizer of the big All Friends Together convention. It traumatized hundreds of people. Because of this one marriage ending in an extremely ordinary way, I might add. Right? Yeah. A way that you couldn't really, it wouldn't make a movie. Right?
Okay.
And so, therefore, but like I said, hundreds of people traumatized who had completely invested in this particular relationship as a social glue of the entire activity of role-playing, and even of role-playing these particular sorts of games. And in these particular venues, and interacting with each other online. It was just, you can see that in the sort of large-scale version of encounter therapy. These large self-help franchises. Where people have written all these books and run workshops all over the world, and they have their little program and their ideologies and their terminologies, and all these people, who encourage their friends to come to these workshops and stuff. And then when the couple splits up, the whole fucking thing just completely socially explodes.
For us, it wasn't really at the very deep personal level as what you're discussing, but it's more when we had schism, or sometimes it was because of interpersonal relationships, so people hating each other for whatever reasons, but we also had how should I put that, divisions on what is a good role-playing game, what are the theories that we want to use. Are we more OSR oriented are.
Oh no, not that! For God's sake! What I mean is that entire terminology of OSR in India is broken. So but as soon as that gets in there, whew, nuts.
And we have also. I'm in France. I'm more part of the Forgian. We call ourselves Forgian game designers, but there is another school called jeu de rôle en performance, so performing, which is another kind of theory.
In the Nordic countries, there is a big split between the LARPers and LARP-like groups, and they are very oriented toward the thespian performance. A lot of Stanislavski in there. You feel it. You got to feel it, right? It's very
exactly. They're quite close from. First, this was kind of a disappointment for me because really the first idea was let's be all friends and discuss about RPG and develop our games. But finally, I've come to see the kind of It's not that we are divided because we still talk a lot to each other, but we don't play as much with each other. We listen a lot to what we write and what we see, but it's more scattered in terms of who's playing with whom. I've come to see this as a very positive thing, in a sense that it breaks the consensus.
I actually mentioned the first time. It was either 2005, but I think 2007, that the Forge was considered to be finite in time. That Clinton and I, who were, the effective co-founders of the Forge, had always assumed that this was something that would begin and would end.
Yeah.
And that that by the time 2007 came around, we were starting to actually strategize for what we're going to do next as a phase that would indeed, winds down the Forge. When this got mentioned again sometime around 2009 or 2010 or so, it prompted an internet storm from people and first of all, I was like, why does anyone care? How is this news? And then, how is it news in the sense of being new because it's old? It's not anything we hadn't. Here's the thread, right? I said that. How did you not know that? And so there's the sense of it's not news in that it's not novel, and then second, it's not news because I don't really regard it as important.
Okay.
And then third, if you aren't involved in the Forge or its activities in any way, why do you care? But no, I was wrong. Evidently, this was like the hugest thing. RPGNet had, I think, its historically biggest, shitstorm thread about this, and people came to interview me, and every question they asked me was dumber than the last. And with some respect to some people, at least, they were trying to understand. But most of the interview was me saying what I just said.
Okay.
How did you not know? And who cares? They were like, what do you think of what so-and-so said? And I was like, huh? And I was like, haven't you read the threads? And I was like, no. So anyway, but what I'm saying is that this was on purpose for a reason, for the same reason that I talked about this thing being a turnstile for the individual. I also did have a hobby mission, which was to not legitimize our thoughts or our way to play, even though there was no one way to play, but rather to legitimize self-publishing. That you could, if you wanted your game to be in a store, there's no reason why saying that you were self-published should be a turn-off. Then
you have no idea how much we've fought over that, and we're still fighting.
Well, it seems it succeeded very well in many, many places. You can go into game stores anywhere here in Europe, Italy, and the Nordic countries where I've, the ones that I'm familiar with, and over in the UK, and you'll find an indie shelf.
Yeah.
Or even an indie room sometimes.
Yeah.
You will also find that many of the people who are working on this sort of high gloss work either over at Hasbro or in the various divisions of, splintered divisions of White Wolf and any number of other things that people think of as big, they have all been participating in this same kind of thing. Many of those people have their own independently published game now. And so it is completely, in terms of global statements over I'd like to make my game available, whether it's just a PDF on the internet, whether it's asking for money for it for any way, shape, or form, whether it's putting it into some other venue or having it at a convention, in some way that's not in some ghetto of the convention, which is very much the case before. Now, it's okay. And a big part of the credit goes to Peter Adkison when he was running Gen Con LLC, because I was very upfront with him. And I said, I'm breaking the rules. I found a loophole. I can bring in a ton of first-time publishers with their, crap little games, and we will run a con within your con. And so I was this was back in 2002. And I said to Peter, can I do this? I mean, if you say we can't, I won't, but, I want to. And he said, yes, do that. And so Peter was an enthusiastic customer at the booth every year. And so I give a great deal of credit to him in permitting us to do this. But it also, having that booth, and then a lot of us visiting the Gamma trade show, really pushed it to retailers that they couldn't afford not to do this. We said record stores do this all the time, right? You have your indie shelf.
Yeah.
And no, they're not going to match the categories in your distributor catalog. You're not going to be able to put them on the fantasy shelf and the science fiction shelf, and it's not going to work. You have and they'll look funny. They'll be different sizes. Everything you hate as a retailer. Everything that frightens you, they're going to be at different price points. They're different publishers, so you can't go to the one guy. They all wanted to know, who do I talk to for these games? That's you, right? And I was like, no. And so everything that frightens you, that you hate as a retailer, you have to embrace to do this. But you can't afford not to do it. And so that's now normal. And I fought for it. Luke Crane fought for it. Different other people like Peter and so forth did their part from different angles. And by 2010, it was evident. And I said to Clinton, and actually Vincent was helping me out at that level of that time of the Forge instead of Clinton. And I said, I think we're done. The big mission is done. And it's getting harder and harder to do the proper turnstile, or rather, I think the last few years of the Forge were very, very good for the individual experience there. Partly because people who bought into loving the Forge or being supportive of it, as soon as it said it was over on commercial level, they said, well, I'm done with it now. Just like you said, when it's from a certain perspective, to say that this endeavor is over is the kiss of death as far as the support. People are not invested in it. It's the American ideal, right? The thing has to grow, and it has to become more pervasive. It has to become more normalized, and more and more people need to be able to make money off it. And if that isn't positive every year, those variables, then we call the whole thing a failure. And of course, I was flying in the face of this. 100%. So, so the idea that I told people at that point, this is why I brought this up. I told people at this point just what you said. It's positive for you to go and do more, whatever you want. All the things you don't like about any decisions I made, guess what? Bonus. You get to do it your way. And
exactly. And which is something that which is also kind of rewarding. I remember in the early 2010s, there was a lot that we had to do kind of all alone. I mean, we had to be communicating, theorizing, managing the community, publishing our games, understanding the theories we were producing.
Oh, we were in the same circle of hell, Fabien. Good, hooray!
and there is a time in which other people are also taking over, doing their own things, and this is very rewarding because finally you can do your thing. And
for one thing, it takes a lot of the pressure off. I no longer have to worry about your situations.